Shadow men are men made out of darkness. They are some of the most evil beings I have ever seen. I fear them every day now that I've seen one, and I fear writing about them will cause them to seek revenge on me. They are attracted to those who are curious about them, so listen at your own risk. There are some people who attract darkness. It doesn't mean they are dark people themselves, it's just the hand that life has dealt them. I was lying awake one night, staring at the ceiling, unable to fall asleep as usual. I was growing bored and restless, so I sighed and I rolled over. What I wasn't expecting to see was him. No one was supposed to be in my house except for me and my dog. He was standing in front of my closet, staring down at me intently. His hands were by his side and his feet were planted firmly on the ground. He was standing so excitedly, staring at me, that he looked like he was almost ready to pounce on me. He had no features on his face. He was just a three-dimensional black figure, standing in front of my white closet, which is why I could see his silhouette so clearly. You know how you think you see somebody standing in your room because the shadows are playing tricks on you? Well, this wasn't that. He was tall, way taller than me. He was dressed like a man in a normal pair of pants and a long-sleeved shirt. I could feel his presence, and it was tamed maliciousness. He didn't seem to want to hurt me right now, but I could feel that could suddenly change on a whim. He was watching everything I did, as if I was some kind of lab rat, and he was a scientist about ready to dissect me. He had no eyes or mouth. He had no facial expression, but I could see in the way he tilted his head towards me and his body language. He was obsessed with me. Neither of us knew how to react at first. We were both surprised by what had happened. I don't think he expected me to roll over, and I didn't expect to see a shadowy three-dimensional figure studying me at my closet. I was panicking as I wondered whether he would pounce on me and if I had time to run out of the room. He looked on the edge of doing something, and I could feel that he was contemplating his next move. But instead of pouncing on me, he disappeared, which later I read is something shadow men are prone to do when you look them straight in the eye. They don't like to be caught watching you. I wanted to believe that it was just a vision during sleep paralysis. I've had sleep paralysis before, where I've seen scary things that weren't there, but I was wide awake this time. I hadn't been sleeping, and I was moving the entire time as well. You can't move during sleep paralysis. You're either falling asleep or you're waking up when something happens. The scariest part about the whole thing for me was he was staring at my back for a while, just watching me. I assumed if someone was staring at me like that I would feel it. But that didn't happen, and the way he was standing, it had been obvious that he had been there for a while. Because I was facing my back to him, he might have thought I was asleep, and that it was safe to watch me without being caught. And I wonder if there were other nights where he just watched me as I go to sleep. From what I've read, shadow men like to watch the same people over and over again. Because of it, I struggle to fall asleep. Every single night, I think of the shadow man. I wonder what he wants, and if he'll ever do more than just watch me sleep. I stay up many hours and just wonder if I'll see him again, and hoping that I don't. I was in my kitchen, home alone, cooking dinner, when I saw something black crawling on all fours out of the corner of my eye. It raced into the guest bedroom, which was to the right of the kitchen, and separated by a gate from the living room. I thought it was my dog, who was also black, who sometimes escapes the living room and tries to find scraps on the kitchen floor or in the trash when I'm not looking, then runs to the guest room to hide. I yelled his name and dropped what I was doing to chase him out of the guest room, but I saw movement from the living room as my dog raised his head and turned in my direction in confusion. He'd been sleeping there the whole time. I was very confused about how he had gotten back there so quickly without me noticing it, until I realized the gate wasn't even open. It wasn't him. So what was that thing? Had I imagined it? After all, I had seen it out of the corner of my eye, and sometimes our eyes play tricks on us. Also, my dog wasn't barking, and when he sees something that scares him, he usually goes crazy. It had to be my imagination. I slowly tiptoed towards the bedroom. I don't know why I was being so quiet in my own house, but I was scared to peek into that room. I had to, though, or I couldn't go back to cooking. I had to make sure things were safe, just in case. Logically, I knew it was safe, but I had to convince my emotions, too. My heart was pounding hard in my chest, but I tried to tell myself not to be scared and that I was just being chicken. When I got to the doorway, I stared inside the bedroom. Nothing was there. I breathed a sigh of relief and relaxed. I was definitely seeing things and scaring myself for no reason. My dog started barking viciously. I jumped in surprise and whirled around. He was at the gate now, snarling in my direction, but there wasn't anything there. Maybe he'd heard something in the garden, or something. I ignored him and went all the way into the room, just to make sure I looked in every corner, and that's when I saw him. I turned to the right and saw him standing in the corner, in a part of the room you couldn't see until you entered it. He was black all over. He looked like a three-dimensional shadow. He was much taller than me, and his hands were raised above his head. He was frozen in place, but his posture was aggressive, like he was in the middle of charging towards someone to attack them. I stood there in shock, just staring and willing him to disappear. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I wanted to run, but I was scared any movement would awaken him and cause him to charge towards me. I had a bat in the other room, knives in the kitchen I could stab him with, but you could hardly stab something supernatural like that. He was pure, thick darkness, and even though I couldn't see his facial expressions, I could feel the power and hatred coming from his eyes. I barely blinked when he came running at me, his fist clenched, aiming for my head. I dodged out of the way by running to the side and out of the bedroom door, but I knew this technique couldn't keep me safe for long. He was moving so fast my eyes could barely keep up with him, and I knew when he ran out of the bedroom too, I'd be at his mercy, whether he decided to kill me or not. So I fell down to my knees in the kitchen and covered my head with my hands in order to protect myself from being too badly injured. It wasn't the greatest plan, but I was running on instinct at that point. No blows came down on me, and my dog had stopped barking. I slowly opened my eyes and uncovered my head. There was no shadow creature anywhere around me. Eventually, I went back into the room and looked around, even searching the closet. There was no shadow creature there. He must have disappeared somehow. I was terrified the rest of the day while I was home alone, but my dog kept me company and I didn't see the shadow man again. I always feel a little nervous now, walking past the room to get into the kitchen. I always feel better when we have guests over. It was after dark in the small town I used to live in, and I was home alone. My dog was getting antsy. He'd had some stomach issues, and although I'd taken him to the vet and given him medication, he was still feeling ill, and I had to take him on walks more than usual. I know he had to go to the bathroom, but I've always been afraid to go on walks at night. Although there wasn't much danger of crime in my small town I lived in at the time, there was a lot of danger running into wild animals like bears or cougars or coyotes. So we went in the backyard only, and I sat and waited while he used the restroom. I also let him sniff around a bit, because that was his favorite thing to do. I wanted him to get the energy out before we went back into the house. As I watched my dog do his thing, I got this weird feeling that somebody was staring at me, so I looked over to the right in the woods, in the direction where this feeling was coming from, and I saw what looked like a shadowy figure, standing still, staring at me. I froze, hoping if I was still that he'd leave and forget he ever saw me. It was foolish, I know, but I didn't have any weapons on me. My porch light was on, and it was dark in the woods, so I thought it might be a trick of my eye, even though he very clearly had the shape of a man. I thought maybe my eyes were adjusting to the darkness in the woods, and I was seeing things. That's why I kept still and watched for a while, hoping what I saw would change. But that's when my dog started growling in the same direction. He raced forward, barking at the top of his lungs, chasing the figure until he was blocked from going any further by the fence. When he got close, the shadow disappeared completely into the darkness, and I thought he had chased whatever it was off. But instead, he lowered his ears and yelped like somebody had heard him. He came charging towards the glass door that led into the backyard, and my heart raced in my chest as panicked cries came from me as well. It's not because I saw whatever mysterious thing he had seen in the woods. It was the fact that I had never seen my dog scared like that, and I knew something really bad had had to happen, and I was completely terrified, not knowing what that horrible thing was. My dog and I both pushed past each other, trying to get into the house as fast as possible. I slammed the glass door shut and locked it. I was shaking all over, and it felt like I was moving in slow motion. But I didn't feel better after I closed that door. I still felt like someone was watching me, and I didn't want that man or creature or whatever it was staring at me, so I turned off all the lights in the house so he couldn't see me, and also the porch light so it would be hard for him to get past the glass door because it was pitch black out there. I grabbed my cell phone and put it in my pocket. I didn't dare turn it on. I didn't want my face highlighted in the darkness, so it would be easy to find me. My dog and I both sat on the couch in the living room, hugging. I was practically holding my breath as I hugged him. I don't know why, but it felt like if I moved or did just the wrong thing, the shadow man would get me. It was really hard to sit in the pitch blackness like that. Your imagination can freak you out. I couldn't do it for very long, and I kept hearing noises coming from the backyard. It sounded like the fence in the back was creaking, which it sometimes did in the wind. The noise wasn't that unusual, but considering the circumstances, I was afraid that it wasn't actually the wind, and it was the shadow guy hopping over the fence. I still had that uneasy feeling that I was being watched. So I tiptoed slowly to the light switch. I had to feel around to find it. I just wanted to look at the backyard for 1 second to reassure myself that he was gone, and then maybe I could let go of this fear. But as I grabbed the light switch and turned it on, I saw a black figure pressed against the glass door. It was a tall man, his face pressed against the glass, his hands above his head, gripping the glass as well, and his face was turned towards me, like he had been watching me the entire time I was tiptoeing around in the darkness. I thought maybe he was human before, but I could tell that he wasn't. He was just blackness, pure, thick blackness, pressed against the glass. Staring at him felt like staring at concentrated evil. My dog yelped in response and raced towards my bedroom door. I ran that way too because I couldn't stand the shadow man staring at me, and we both hid under the covers after I locked my door. I contemplated calling the police, but I didn't know what I would tell them. If I told them the truth, they would think I was crazy, so would my family. So instead, I texted my dad and said, "Hey, come over, hurry, I'm scared," without explaining it. I get scared a lot, so my dad didn't take me too seriously, and they came home after an hour, after they were done seeing their movie. I was so relieved when they got home, and I told them I had seen something scary outside, and even turned on the porch light to prove it to them, which was somehow now off, even though it hadn't been earlier. But when I turned on the light, there was nothing there, and they all thought I was crazy. The worst part of that was that my mom lectured me the next day that I'd forgotten to lock the glass door that night when I let the dog out, but I know I locked it. I get scared when I try to understand how the glass door got unlocked and that the shadow man entered my house without me knowing.